This week on Jerusalem Dateline, tragedy strikes an Israeli religious festival with dozens killed in a stampede. And social media used to fuel Arab unrest in Jerusalem and elsewhere in Israel. Plus, Israel lays out a plan for reopening tourism after a year of COVID closures. And a tribute to one of Jerusalem's longtime and beloved Christian leaders. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Israeli officials say nearly 50 died and more than 150 were injured at a Jewish religious festival. It's one of the worst civilian disasters in Israel's history. The tragedy occurred when a stampede began at the festival of Lag BaOmer, a Jewish holiday honoring a rabbi and mystic from the 2nd century who was buried on Mount Meron in northern Israel. The disaster was apparently caused by overcrowding, with large numbers together in a narrow passage.
We saw people pushing over the other, and slowly we saw people being trampled. At this point, when I saw the people, I started to go outside. There, we saw evacuating people every moment and conducting CPR.
It was the first religious gathering of its size to be held legally since Israel lifted nearly all restrictions from the COVID pandemic.
Absolutely difficult sights. I'm about 10 years a paramedic, and I don't remember I've seen sights like these. We are in a mass casualty incident. I see here tens of people laying on the floor. I see here tens of injured, walking and bleeding. I see here children and adults. Very difficult sights.
The Israeli military came in to help evacuate the wounded. Officials estimate 100,000, mostly ultra-Orthodox Jews, gathered to celebrate the festival. Large crowds traditionally light bonfires, pray, and dance as part of the celebrations. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the site and earlier had called it a great tragedy. The stampede is likely to have a political impact as well. Netanyahu needs the support of his longtime allies, the ultra-Orthodox, to maintain any hopes he might have of staying in power. Efforts are still underway to identify the victims and connect families with missing relatives. Authorities will be searching for answers. As Netanyahu said, everyone is praying for the victims. Could social media be driving the recent clashes between Jews and Arabs around Jerusalem's Old City? One name going around is the TikTok Intifada, and experts are saying that politics, social media, and the Abraham Accords all play a part. This video on TikTok showing an Arab slapping 2 Orthodox Jews reportedly spread like wildfire among Palestinians, encouraging more attacks. Now, multiple TikTok videos are getting blamed for adding fuel to clashes between Jews and Arabs in Jerusalem.
The most disturbing thing is that this thing has started off as a TikTok challenge and it went viral.
What happens is the Palestinian Authority gets the whole environment very tense, and it creates a lot of anger and creates a lot of terror energy in the background. And then what happens is all you need is one TikTok video, and all of a sudden you're going to get a lot of copycats.
Most of the trouble has taken place here at the Damascus Gate of the Old City. During their holy month of Ramadan, Muslims often gather here in the evening after a day of fasting.
For definitely, on Ramadan, spiritual fervors are higher, and this is exactly where people from Hamas like to, hit the spot when people are already feeling more religious fervor.
In a sermon given at Al-Aqsa Mosque, however, Sheikh Dr. Mustafa Abu Sway condemned the attacks.
A number of youngsters threw hot coffee on the face of an honorable Haredi man. These are religious people. Such behavior is not Islamic in any way, shape, or form.
Complicating the matter, though, is a far-right Jewish group called Lahava, which attacked Arabs in the streets of Jerusalem.
They're definitely a bunch of hooligans that are organized by a very horrible man with terrible, sinister agenda. But this is a very small fringe group that everybody condemns, including the mayor of Jerusalem. When they're not attacking Arabs, they're attacking all sorts of other people in the city, like the LGBT community, for example.
CBN News has covered Lahava before. In 2019, the same group became violent in a protest against Messianic Jews at a Jerusalem congregation. Deputy Mayor Flor Hassan Nahum feels there's more to this recent outbreak.
I don't think this violence, especially from the Arab side, is spontaneous. I think there's something more sinister behind it. We've seen the fact that the rocket fire started from Gaza to the southern Israeli towns at the same time.
Palestinian Media Watch Director Itamar Marcus sees election politics as the source of this latest violence.
In the past, when there was talk about elections, both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority would increase the violence and the terror. In fact, we had full terror waves in the past because the way Hamas and Fatah compete for votes and compete for popularity is through terror and killing Israelis.
Marcus uses the 2014 Gaza war as a prime example. That year, Palestinian election polls showed the Fatah party clearly leading over Hamas. Sensing a loss, Hamas kidnapped and murdered 3 Israelis in the West Bank. That led to war. Hamas rose in the polls, and the elections were canceled.
And the shocking thing was that Hamas, which clearly had been defeated and brought 2,000 deaths on Gaza, yet was perceived by Palestinians as having been victorious over Israel.
According to Marcus, Fatah posted this video that states there is an uprising and intifada in Jerusalem. The Palestinian Authority just canceled the planned election again, although Marcus says he's not sure the violence is over. Hassan Nahum believes the Hamas rocket fire is in opposition to the Abraham Accords signed between Israel and Muslim states last year.
I think that Hamas has been waiting for the time to kind of take revenge on Israel for this and make their opposition heard. And I think this is exactly the reaction that they planned.
Hassan Nahum says the mayor has been reaching out to Arab, civil, and religious leaders in the city and hopes a sense of calm will return to Jerusalem. Republicans are calling for an investigation into John Kerry, and some are calling for him to resign from the Biden administration. This after leaked audio revealed Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif saying the former Secretary of State told him about more than 200 Israeli operations against Iranians in Syria. The New York Times reported Zarif makes that claim in a 3-hour recording. Kerry served as President Obama's Secretary of State, holding in-depth negotiations with Iranian leaders in pursuit of the 2015 nuclear deal. In a tweet, Kerry denied the allegations, calling them unequivocally false. He's now serving as President Biden's climate czar. President Trump's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and other Republicans are calling for a congressional investigation. Coming up, U.S. recognition of the Armenian genocide sparks condemnation from Turkey. For the first time, an American president has officially recognized the Armenian genocide from more than a century ago. While the announcement led to much jubilation, it also sparked condemnation from Turkey. For years, the White House recognized Armenian Remembrance Day while avoiding the term genocide, mainly to steer clear of potentially alienating Turkey, a NATO ally. But the White House statement said, each year on this day, we remember the lives of all those who died in the Ottoman-era Armenian genocide and recommit ourselves to preventing such an atrocity from ever again occurring. American Armenians hailed the decision they see as long overdue.
We worked very hard to see America recognize the Armenian genocide, and so this is a new beginning for us. I feel it's a new beginning for my children.
On Twitter, Turkey's foreign minister condemned the declaration, writing, "Words cannot change or rewrite history," and Turkey entirely rejects it. Beginning in April 1915, Ottoman authorities deported, massacred, or marched to death 1.5 million Armenians in the first mass extermination of the 20th century. Turkey doesn't deny the deaths from that era, yet refuses to call it genocide. The government maintains the death toll is inflated, and it all resulted from civil unrest. Here in Jerusalem's Old City, the Armenian Quarter reminds us of this community's rich Christian heritage. Still, constant reminders like this poster signify the scars and memories the genocide left on Armenians here in Jerusalem and around the world. During a ceremony in Armenia, Armenia's prime minister called Biden's statement a powerful step on the way to acknowledging the truth. The White House announcement will likely cast a chilling impact on U.S.-Turkish relations. Its foreign ministry said it would open a deep wound that undermines mutual trust and friendship, and Turkey summoned the U.S. ambassador to protest President Biden's decision. For now, though, Armenians worldwide feel an historic injustice is being righted. The COVID pandemic has devastated global travel. For Israel, tourism is a key part of its economy, and now Israel's leaders are trying to revive it. In 2019, Israel set a record for tourism when 4.5 million visitors came to the Holy Land. Then the 2020 pandemic slammed the door, causing the number of tourists to plummet more than 80%, resulting in a loss of $8 billion. For more than a year, the COVID pandemic kept tourists from coming to visit Israel, like the city of Tel Aviv behind me. Now Israel's tourism ministry has a plan to reopen Israel to the world.
We are starting the first pilot on the 23rd of May. It will take place for a few weeks, by which we will bring in no more than 20 or more groups of tourists, fully vaccinated with travel agents, so that it can be monitored on one hand, and we can also learn from the lessons and improve the rules and see if things need to be improved.
Then, hopefully about a month later, an unlimited number of groups may be allowed in. By July, it's possible Israel will open its doors to individuals. Still, this timetable could change, since the health ministry recommended the May 23rd date be delayed until the end of June. Israel's reopening comes after an aggressive vaccination campaign that's seen most of the population vaccinated, with COVID rates dropping dramatically.
Israel is now fully open. The attractions, the restaurants, the hotels, our numbers of COVID-19 cases are getting fewer and fewer every day. We're waiting for you to come.
Incoming tourists, however, will have to jump through some hoops. The plan requires all to be fully vaccinated. They must have a negative COVID test before boarding the flight and then take an antibodies test upon arrival. Nearly half of all tourists coming here are Christian, because for many, coming to Israel is like a dream.
I want to say to Christians around the world that Israel is missing you and is looking forward to you coming and seeing all the sacred place and the history.
Yet some Christians in the U.S. remain reluctant to get the vaccine.
Unfortunately, I don't have very optimistic messages for them. Israel is now in a very, very good condition health-wise. It's a very healthy destination, and we cannot put that in danger.
While it's a small start, Israel hopes once again millions of visitors will return to the Holy Land. Up next, a look back to what tourism in Israel once was, and hopefully will be again soon. As you saw in our previous story, Israel's tourism ministry is working hard to reopen Israel to the world. Here's a story from pre-COVID days about the profound experience it is for Christians when they walk where Jesus walked. This is the scene outside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. It's just one example of the many Christians making their way to the Holy Land this year. CBN News followed one church group on their pilgrimage. Many Christians begin their journey not in Jerusalem, but up in the Galilee, where Jesus began his earthly ministry. That includes this group from Virginia's New Life Providence Church.
Who knows, Jesus might have been stilling the storm right in this very spot. It certainly wouldn't be unlikely.
Pastor Dan Backens says coming to Israel means a lot.
As a pastor, what I enjoy about coming to Israel is, first of all, to see the excitement in the parishioners that come with me or the guests that can come along in our tour group, to see the Bible come alive for them and what God does in their own heart through their trip here to Israel.
Debbie Carter waited 38 years for her chance.
I have cried and wept and leapt for joy the whole time I've been here, seeing the many spots where my Lord walked.
Many others feel the same.
It's a life-changing experience, a life-changing experience. I would not have missed it for the world.
Like most Christians touring the Galilee, they also visited Capernaum, home of the Apostle Peter, and the Mount of Beatitudes, where Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount. After the Galilee, many tours head south to visit the Dead Sea and Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. But for most, the highlight is Jerusalem, where Jesus died, was buried, and rose again. Here the group is on the Mount of Olives overlooking the city. The most meaningful thing for many Christians is the opportunity to walk where Jesus walked. For example, this is the path many believe Jesus took from the Mount of Olives into Jerusalem. One of those places is the Garden of Gethsemane. The Gospels record this is the place where Jesus prayed the night before he was crucified and said to his Father, "Not my will, but yours be done." For some, it brought home the lesson of the agony of Jesus in the garden.
I don't ever have to be in the Garden of Gethsemane pleading before the Father, because Jesus did it already.
They also walked along the Via Dolorosa, the traditional site where Jesus carried his cross on the way to Calvary, and also sang in St. Anne's Church with its world-famous acoustics. Their tour guide, Erez Bar David, has led thousands of Christians throughout the land of the Bible.
People go through a very, very deep experience, spiritual and emotional experience when they're here. I think it's just this deeper understanding of Scripture.
When you read the Scriptures, you're kind of looking at it in black and white, but when you come here, it just really jumps off the page. It makes the Bible jump off the page, and you're able to see really in color, wow, like this is real. This is really what our faith is built upon.
But is it safe? Many people don't visit Israel because they're afraid.
If I could dispel any kinds of fear about someone traveling to Israel, the media sometimes portrays the threat of terrorism and unrest. Israel is probably the safest tourist destination that there is, because everyone here, Arab, Palestinian, Israeli, Jew, non-Jew, they want tourism.
Israel's tourism minister sees evangelical Christians as much more than just tourists.
You are not the guests, you are partners. It's also, the Holy Land also belongs to you.
Christian pilgrims say there are many reasons to visit Israel, from the personal to the prophetic.
It's a real tangible way that we as Christians in the United States can support Israel in this very important time, not only prophetically, but in their national history, what they're going through too.
It's become an amazing personal experience for me, one that I'll never forget, and it's almost too much to put into words.
And for many, it's like coming home. Still ahead, a tribute to a beloved Jerusalem pastor, mentor, and friend. Finally, the city of Jerusalem lost one of the cornerstones in its Christian community. Pastor Chuck Cobb died on April 27th. Family and friends are mourning his loss, but also celebrating the life of a man who touched so many. On May 14, 1948, Israel became a nation and Chuck Cobb was born. He would go on to serve in this new nation for most of his life. He moved to Israel at the age of 18 and never left. He founded and served as the chairman of the Jerusalem Cornerstone Foundation for more than 54 years, an organization dedicated to biblical study tours and charity to Israel's needy, and states, "We are followers of Jesus who teach the Bible's ancient Jewish context and serve the marginalized in Israel and the Middle East." Kopp served as chairman of the United Christian Council of Israel, an ordained minister with the International Church of the Foursquare Gospel. He pastored the Narkey Street congregation for 24 years. He stepped down in 2016 after he suffered from Parkinson's disease. He served too with the Government Christian Forum, CBN News interviewed Pastor Karp in this 2015 story.
It's the only country in the Middle East, the whole Middle East, that actually has a growing Christian population. So that says a lot, because all the other countries around this region, the Christians are fleeing as fast as they can.
A humble and a curious man, he loved asking questions. Chuck was a husband to Liz, father of 7 children, grandfather of 16, and for many others, a pastor, mentor, servant, and friend. Those who knew him well say he loved all the peoples of this divided land, Jews, Arabs, and others. One overseas friend added these words: "To say that he was an amazing man is an understatement. In Israel, it is difficult to find a man like Chuck. He loved all people. You were blessed if Chuck was in your corner. He sat with presidents and prime ministers, muftis, as well as the poorest of poor. He was the same among all of them. He led his huge family to love likewise. He led his church with wisdom and gentleness. The Christian community, and really all of Jerusalem, is suffering a huge loss. Many of us across the world are sharing your sorrow and rejoicing with you all." Pastor Chuck was a wonderful example of a life well lived. He was also a close personal friend. But because of the sacrifice of Jesus, we look forward to seeing him again. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time.